on the ground. Anyway, the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States will be pursued through its military preparedness, its partnerships in a network region, through alliances, ongoing arrangements, engagements with Japan, South Korea, Australia, Southeast Asian states. The Southeast Asian states are not quite alliance partners of the US though, right? Only 2 of them maybe, perhaps. Japan is, South Korea is, Australia is, but India is not quite also an alliance partner. It is a dialogue partner maybe, a security dialogue partner, but not quite. So the paragraph that I've given there is about how Southeast Asia should be involved. That's quite important because, as I said, ASEAN is a very important entity within this region. So let's move on to the next slide. There is this particular part of the Indo-Pacific strategy, which is not new, but it's not, to me, terribly the Quad, which is a very strong relationship, mind you, between Japan, India, Australia, and of course with the US as its main kind of proponent, right? The Quad members share a vision, the same one, FIOP, etc., rules-based kind of idea with all the kinds of institutions, the WTO, etc., that have been set up within the ambit of this hegemonic stability that has been part of the US vision. And China, of course, is the implicit target of the Quad, right? Okay, 7 minutes, good. Next one, please. This is a more serious one. This particular, we're talking about maintaining this hegemonic system in a free and open Indo-Pacific. This is more serious. AUKUS was announced quite recently, and it took people a bit by surprise, including ASEAN. And both Indonesia and Malaysia took some umbrage. I don't think it really objected very hard, but it was concerned, for example, that nuclear powered subs would be given or will be supplied by the US and UK to Australia. Mind you, by the 2030s, you're going to take about 3 decades before that happens. It also comes with a very huge bill, formation. Now, talking about all this also tells us that the hegemonic stability of the hegemonic position of the United States is clearly a much more powerful one than that of, say, China or Russia, because in the case of China or Russia, they don't really have too many allies. If you think of it, China doesn't have a single ally. Most recently, it signed an agreement with Solomon Islands on security. What else has it done? Nothing much, and the Russians don't have too many, allies in the region. So the dominance of the US is still there, that's for sure, despite the fact that we have said that, China has been a disruptor. But ASEAN seems to be very important because ASEAN remains fairly neutral. ASEAN is not playing the American game 100%. So ASEAN remains a factor, I think, in this whole idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific. And next slide. I wanted to go to another one. Yeah. Then we go back to the other one. So ASEAN has its own position on the Indo-Pacific, and this was announced very loudly, very clearly rather, very firmly, as a vision that is somewhat different from that of the Western powers, let's call it. Western, now we also have Australian, Indian. So it sees the ASEAN playing its role, the famous ASEAN phrase, ASEAN centrality. ASEAN still wants to be a major player. In a way, I would say ASEAN wants to have this middle powership role. ASEAN wants to be the middle power within all of these developments. It doesn't want to go along with the big power, configuration, like one side or the other. And as many of our scholars here have written, it wants to hedge between the two major powers. It wants to, rather than bandwagon on one or the other. So ASEAN has a very important role to play, and ASEAN also has a role to play in the South China Sea. Can we go back to the previous slide? One slide before. Yeah, these are the problems that I think are the major problems that the Indo-Pacific, in a way, is confronting. One of the things I haven't talked about, I haven't put into the presentation, is Taiwan. Of course, it's always there. Taiwan is there. But if you see Taiwan as part and parcel of China disruption, then we can see that as also, part of the importance of China and the rise of China as a kind of disruption of American hegemony. But if you look at the South China Sea overall, this becomes the kind of bone of contention. This becomes the area where there could be flashpoints as well, because freedom of navigation is what the US stands for. FONOPs are what they do. The Chinese has built like crazy, installations on reefs and whatnot, and they have been pulled up by the permanent court to say that these things are in contravention of international law. But nobody enforces international law in these, right? So the Chinese can do as they like. But again, the middle factor here is still ASEAN. ASEAN plays this role of, for a very long time now, not terribly successful, the DOC, a declaration of conduct. Basically, how do we be good guys in this area, which could flare up into war? So it tries to continue to do that, although ASEAN themselves are claimants. Not all ASEAN states, quite a few ASEAN states are claimants to the South China Sea, and you know the story about Malaysia. Malaysia has been hounded by Chinese jets and whatnot in its oil exploration of the Lacunia shoals off very close to where is it? Sarawak. And the Chinese 9-dash lines all the way to Malaysia. So this is a very, I think, serious issue that continues to be a problem and could be, again, one of the possible flashpoints of the kinds of disruptions that can occur, even war in Indo-Pacific region. I have to jump 2 slides, and I'm coming to the end of my presentation. One more. This is a pretty dense slide, but basically I wanted to stress again the importance of the peace factor. Malaysia was the first to propose a zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality. It's all in my books, way back in 1971. And I think that still remains as a major, important signal and mission for the major powers, whether it be the United States of America or the People's Republic of China or even the Russian Republic, Russian Federation. Yeah, it's a federation. So ASEAN has done these things. It hasn't been very, very good at containing internal wars, but it has been very successful in stopping interstate wars that we know for a fact. So it is what the doyen of political science he calls a pluralistic security community. Karl Deutsch. A pluralistic security community is one in which you have a number of actors and units coming together and creating a zone of security where they do not enter. Of course, his concept is a bit deeper, but let's take it at the surface level. They do not enter into any conflicts with each other. So ASEAN has succeeded in doing that. And it has also succeeded in mediating, or members of ASEAN have also succeeded in mediating one or two things, such as the Bangsa Moro conflict. Malaysia was deeply involved in that. We provided the venue for the negotiations. And I think it's 2012 when the final, the autonomous zone for the Bangsa Moro people agreement was signed, and Najib Razak, I think was the prime minister then, attended that meeting when it was signed. So these are the things that ASEAN can do. One big footnote. ASEAN's sick man is Myanmar. We haven't been able to do anything in Myanmar. There's been a lot of constructive engagement, which hasn't been terribly constructive up to today. And now we have the 5-point consensus, which has not taken us anywhere. And there is a raging civil war in Myanmar. I've just attended the session on refugees, talking about Rohingyas. 1 million Rohingyas were actually expelled from in recent years, right? And many of them have found themselves on the shores of Malaysia. And there are also the minorities, which are now in a civil war with the military regime. So the sick man of ASEAN is Myanmar. I'm not sure. As I said, ASEAN is not in the business of stopping internal wars, but it has managed to stop interstate wars. But I think this is one internal war it has to do something about. My time is almost up, I think. Let's have the last slide or so. This is the last slide. So those are my parting words. Very long words, sorry, long phrases there. My notion of what I call ASEAN norm entrepreneurship. And of course, the word is not mine. It comes from a very well-known sort of article about international relations, where a constructivist perspective, where you can actually have norms and norm setting for particular regions and for particular sets of countries, which are able to bring together entities into some kind of fairly peaceful, I would say, fairly peaceful relationships, or at any rate, in the case of ASEAN, interstate relationships. So I think ASEAN has done that, the setting of values and norms for regional peace. It has also socialized many of its community building regional norms to create the so-called community. It has created all these platforms, the ARF, EAS, etc., which not only involve ASEAN members, but extra regional actors, right? So the Indo-Pacific actors, all of them are in there, in these ASEAN structures. So this is very important to keep this thing going. ASEAN prevents, manages, but of course doesn't actually resolve regional conflicts and disputes, but it does a preventative diplomacy to the extent that it can, to keep things in a fairly, what you call it, peaceful situation. There are, of course, absences in ASEAN. That's the one I just mentioned, refugee management. That's a terribly difficult one and a very, very serious issue which ASEAN has to deal with. But it can be filled with regional NGOs. This kind of role can be filled. So there can be norm setting for roles that not just states can play. ASEAN can even set norms set norms for roles that non-state actors can play in the region. ASEAN strategies, generally speaking, vis-a-vis major power conflict, should be the ones that I think we're all familiar with, hedging and balancing rather than bandwagoning to offset the hegemonic power of the super big fellows out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yang Berbahagia, Professor Dr. Johan Saravanamuthu, for the keynote speech. Now I would like to invite Yang Berbahagia, Professor Dr. Zarina Osman, to give a token of appreciation to Professor Dr. Johan Saravanamuthu. Please welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed for the plenary session, after this, I would like to call everybody for a tea break, but make it quick because we only have a very short time for a tea break. It's about 5 to 10 minutes. Please help yourself outside of the hall. Thank you. Yeah, a very quick one. Thank you.
to share thoughts on this important subject with us. The backgrounds of Emeritus Professor Dr. Ranjit Singh, Professor Hajjah Rohanas Harun, and Professor Dr. K.S. Nathan are well known, and I need not elaborate. They are sketched in the program booklet. It is my pleasure now to first invite Emeritus Professor Dr. Ranjit. Dr. Ranjit.
Thank you very much, Professor Rina and the organizers and all my colleagues. You have just heard a very overarching talk on the Indo-Pacific region. I'm bringing you down to a very smaller area, a very specific area, and that is Borneo. Mention was made of Myanmar being the sick man of Southeast Asia. At one time, I think Turkey was the sick man of Europe. I do not know whether Borneo will be the sick man or the hero of this region, but I'm going to talk of that. What is going to happen, or what is happening in Borneo. So it's a more substantive, down to earth kind of talk that I'm going to give, not overarching or theoretical in nature. Now, something is brewing in Borneo, especially in the two Malaysian states of Sabah and Sarawak. This has been going on for some time. But with the leadership of two chief ministers, hardliners. One was Adnan Satem in 2017, and now Abang Johari. I call them hardliners, and they have brought state-centric nationalism to new heights, especially in Sarawak, also in Sabah. Now, I had some very intense discussions with groups in both of these states. Most of the time, the news we get is that they are unhappy with the implementation of the Malaysia Agreement, saying that the federal government, Putrajaya, did not keep many of the promises. But I think the undercurrents are deeper, I think. And this is so because they are talking of not just getting back these rights, but that they be treated politically and constitutionally on an equal basis. So when I told them, look, this is not possible under a federal structure. You have in a federal structure, you have a central government, and a central government is always more strong and powerful than your local state governments. You can't be equal to Putrajaya. So if you want to be equal to Putrajaya, there are only two things that can happen. One is you have to renegotiate the Malaysia Agreement and go for not a federation, but what do we call that? Confederation, like what EU is. Confederation is you are in a union, but you preserve your sovereignty. Here, Sabah and Sarawak don't have that sovereignty, but they want to move towards that. So the second option would be to dissolve Malaysia, to get out of this Malaysia Agreement. Now, if that happens, Borneo, I think, is moving towards that. The momentum is towards that. I'll add in a few more factors coming in. If that materializes, Borneo will become another crisis center, because the federal government, is not easy for federal government or any federal government to give up concessions or let their units, regional units, go their own way. Unless we are so advanced and say, okay, let's we give you, let's have a referendum, and if you want to get lost from us, leave us, please do so. It's not going to be that easy. So the other, I can go into some details on this, but I'll like to talk another issue. While this is going on, we are also seeing another momentous change taking place in Borneo, and that is the moving of the center of gravity in Indonesia from Jakarta to a new capital in East Kalimantan, which is called Nusantara. Now, this is a fantastic big project, but it has got a lot of repercussions. Some could be just local repercussions in Kalimantan itself. Previously, there have been a lot of clashes, ethnic clashes, with the transmigration of people from Java. Now, once you have this, it's already taking place, they're already building. Almost $35 billion is going to go into the project. Massive movement of administrative apparatus, massive movement of the other paraphernalia of government, and also followed by massive penetration of Javanese into a non-Javanese area. I would call this a Javanization of Kalimantan. And Javanization of Kalimantan is not going to be that easy. Everybody talks about the great prosperity that Nusantara will bring to Borneo, yes. But what are the other repercussions? If you have gone through, please tell me if I'm going too long, taking too long. There have been terrible ethnic riots or conflicts in Kalimantan because of transmigration. One was in Sambas in 1999. The Dayaks and the Malays, who were traditional settlers or residents of the place, got together, and the clashes were, I don't know how to use the word, whether slashed or a lot of Javanese were killed. They beheaded. Now recently also 2001 in Semantan, central Kalimantan, almost 700 Javanese, Sundanese, I think, 700 decapitated. So how are you going to control this when you are going to move in massively? And the whole project is not just finding a new capital, establishing a new capital, but it is also means that the center of gravity is moving towards Borneo, Javanization, but also followed by transmigration. So transmigration will create a lot of problems. Now, jumping from the local scene to the broader aspects of Nusantara, we have to consider how this will affect the trends that are taking place in Sarawak and Sabah. What will happen? Will it mean that this will hasten separation? Will it encourage separation? How will ASEAN react to this now? Because, so coming back to Johan's, how will ASEAN deal with this kind of issue? If there are greater movements, or this encourages, or this leads to greater prosperity, but also greater movement towards separation. Then what happens to Brunei? We have to think about Brunei. What happens to Sabah? Will they again form an association of their own, which was in colonial days, they did attempt to establish what is known as the North Borneo Federation. Will idea like that, a North Borneo Federation between Sabah, Sarawak and Brunei, will that be revived? So this is all in, the dynamics are there and the possibilities are there. I'll touch on one more thing. So local effects on Sabah, Sarawak and Brunei, but this also means that Indonesia is now emerging as a, I don't know, can I use the word local hegemon? I'm not sure whether Johan will agree with that. Is Indonesia now projecting, power projection into an area which is already terribly hot, South China Sea. But of course, they are on the Sulawesi side. But Sulawesi area is also, many of you, I think, have talked about that or going to talk about it. Sulawesi area is also an area of great conflict. The Sulu question is there. The question of maritime boundaries still not settled. One of them is the Ambalat area between Malaysia and Indonesia. We have this maritime problems with the Philippines. We also have maritime problems with Vietnam. So on a bigger scale, will the shift of power and Indonesia's, shall we say, power projection create more problems in the South China Sea, or will it bring more stability? With that, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Ranjit Singh. I think this is one more, as you said, one more challenge issue which Malaysia and Southeast Asia, ASEAN will have to face, because there's going to be some tremendous, I wouldn't say disruption, but as you hinted, stress that will be caused by the moving of the capital from Jakarta to Kalimantan, and the impact this is going to have upon local politics and the impact to Malaysia, etc. And what this impact will have, what effect this will have on ASEAN, on the rest of the region. This is something, in fact, very, maybe we have a separate session for Dr. Ranjit to address this, because it's very interesting. It's going to be very, very important for the future of Malaysia and the future of the region. Shall I now proceed to Prof. Dr. Rohanas? She has the floor now. Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. I thought it's still morning. Thank you very much, Tan Sri, moderator. And of course, I'd like to congratulate, at the same time, thank you to Professor Zarina for organizing this conference. It brings us all old friends together. I think that's very important. I've not seen Prof. Ranjit for, I think, over 15 years. So thank you for bringing him here. Now, I think my paper or talk, whatever you want, is going to be very brief, because the background, next, I have no control, you see? I'm powerless. The background has been discussed wonderfully by Prof. Johan just now about the Indo-Pacific. So I'm going straight to the issue. Why is it that ASEAN is so ambivalent or ambiguous and cannot give a united response to the issue of the IP, the Indo-Pacific? So now let's look at what are the key issues. Next slides. In 2017, at the second gathering of the Quad members, they discussed all these issues. So if you look at the issues, now there is really nothing new, isn't it? A rule-based order in Asia, as if we have no rules and, we are uncivilized or what. And then freedom of navigation and overflight in the maritime commons. So this is what they really want. Respect for international law, yeah, enhancing connectivity, yes, maritime security, North Korean threat, and non-proliferation, and of course, a la mode or in vogue is terrorism. Right, next. Now let's look at next one. What is the ASEAN position or outlook on the Indo-Pacific? Next. You just go next. Oh, okay, good. All right. Now, as mentioned by Prof. Johan just now, ASEAN is important. So this is the importance of ASEAN. It lies at the center of a dynamic region, etc. And therefore, what I'm getting at is it's in the interest of ASEAN countries to be able to shape their economic and security architecture. This was actually mentioned by Indonesian Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi when she proposed a counter sort of proposal for the IP. So, all right, the rest follows. Next. Okay, so again, ASEAN outlook on the IP envisage ASEAN centrality that Professor Johan talked just now, and that, everybody says, oh, what is ASEAN centrality? You read, especially in Western scholars, they tend to not ridicule, but sort of minimize, the idea and the importance of ASEAN centrality. For us in ASEAN, I think this is very important. It's about the only thing that we own and we can possess, if you want. All right. So the idea of the Indo-Pacific seems to threaten that ASEAN centrality. So what Indonesia proposed is keep ASEAN centrality through these ASEAN-led mechanisms that exist already. And then also, because Indonesia is looking for a middle path or a middle way in order to make the IP more acceptable or palatable to the ASEAN countries. Okay, let's look at the, these are the problems why some of ASEAN countries, not to say they cannot accept, but that they don't understand why the IP is like that. So these are the things. They say it's fuzzy, concept not clear, leadership problem. Who leads IP? The Indo-Pacific. Because who leads matters. If it's the United States, I think there are going to be lots of, not to say rejection, but protest. People are not comfortable with the United States leadership. And then who else in the Quad? India? Well, it's a newcomer, so to speak. Japan, there are certain weaknesses. And Australia, I think it's too ambitious. So they have to settle this first. Okay, next. And also very important, China is excluded in the narrative in the text. So that is a problem in ASEAN. So because we don't want to exclude China, because ASEAN-China relations brings to ASEAN countries, a number of benefits, economic benefits, although there are challenges. So the challenges would be in terms of security. All right, next. All right. This is the dilemma for ASEAN, actually. Okay, next. All right. Same bed, different dreams. I remember this book, quite thick. And one day my niece, she was going through my library and she saw the title of the book. So she took, she was young girl, very interested. And then it was so boring, she just put it away. uh, so, all right. So we are in the same region, maybe, same bed, but we have different aspirations. We have different dreams from this. Okay, next. All right, these are the reasons why it is difficult to find a common response among ASEAN countries. Next. This is Indonesia. It says yes, but Indonesia did not reject the IP. However, they make modification, as I explained just now. All right, next one. Okay, I have categorized into, sort of three. One is Indonesia, the leader, sort of pathfinder. Next one is countries which seem to like or to accept, however, very cautiously, and that's Vietnam and the Philippines. For reasons. Philippines is a traditional ally or friend of the United States. Although under Duterte, we saw that they tried to be more independent or move away from being, the whatever you want to call, the lapdog of the United States. Sorry for that expression. Now, Vietnam did not say they reject, but their response has been quite muted. Now, if you look at the geopolitics, the geography of Vietnam and China, then you would understand why. Even if they like the IP project, they cannot say, yes, we like it, because China has already warned that this project is going to fail. China said that it will dissipate like foams in the ocean. Apa nama buoy, the foams in the ocean. And maybe sure enough today, the foam has dissipated, but the animal is still there. So the whale is still there. All right, next. The other category, some countries are very enthusiastic. I see Thailand, very enthusiastic, because Thai foreign policy, as always, is very opportunistic. We call it the lalang, foreign policy. The wind blows this way, you go this way. It blows that way, you go that way. So they want to be able to take advantage of both. Have your cake and eat it. So this is Thailand. However, it still doesn't want to turn IP into a bulwark against China or Russia. So there is some reservation despite the enthusiasm. Next. All right, I say locating lesser voice. Who are the lesser voice? Malaysia and Myanmar. Very ambiguous, a bit quiet. Although it was Mahathir who said, all right, we accept IP so long as they don't bring their fleet here. That's Mahathir, right? So Myanmar, as Prof. Ranjit said, was it Prof. Ranjit who said the sick man of Europe? Oh, Prof. Johan. No, sick man of ASEAN, yes. So we understand why, it keeps quiet. But Malaysia, I'm a bit puzzled. Okay, let's, next one. Next. Okay. I think both Myanmar and Malaysia, they are too engrossed in domestic political problems. So we don't have time for foreign policy. I mean, until today, I have not heard anything significant from the new government about foreign policy because too busy with domestic politics. Can't blame them. And I don't know to what extent it's true. They say after Mahathir left, that Malaysia's foreign policy has been what? Etched out of the world stage. Prof. Johan can say it or testify whether it's true or not true. Etched out, okay? So this is what Malaysia is today, ambivalent, non-committal, wait and see. But if at all Malaysia must come out, make public announcement on the position on the IP, to me, there's only one option, to support it. That's why we keep quiet. You can't say otherwise. If you say no, you'll bear the consequences. All right? Next. Okay, the evolution, I think it's, the IP seems to me it stalled, although it's not dead. Maybe it will come back. All right, next. Okay, these are the challenges we have already explained. Now, one of the, well, not say the challenge, but I agree with Prof. Johan that ASEAN is good. Why? Because ASEAN is not like EU, an association like EU. We have our ASEAN way, and it seems to work until today. So, you know, there were those years when ASEAN bashing was in fashion, until Wisma Putra says, stop it. So, well, today we see that it's good policy, ASEAN way. All right, next. Yeah, all right, conclusion. We make our own conclusion. Those are my conclusion, and you don't need to agree with it. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Prof. Rohanas. She exploited the response of the members of ASEAN to the Indo-Pacific strategy that was introduced recently into the region. And she underlined again, as Prof. Johan has done, the importance of ASEAN, how we have to remain together and be more cohesive in order to be able to respond to the challenges before us. So may I now invite Professor Dr. Nathan? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to all of you. It's a great pleasure actually to be here to witness the launch of the Malaysian International Studies Association. But a few pointers also for a new association like MyISA. We had an experience also with an earlier association with similar objectives, the Malaysian International Affairs Forum. That was formed in August 1983, and I was the first founding president. And so we developed the organization, and then, but very unfortunately, 3 decades later, the Registrar of Societies deregistered the organization. And so I called up and I asked what happened. To my shock and dismay, they said, number one, the registrar said, no annual meetings were held. And number two, no financial reports were submitted for 3 consecutive years. So MIAF was terminated on the 13th of December, 2016. So we had a similar organization with similar goals, but I'm sure that you're going to do very much better than us, and we wish you very well. And I think the important pointers here for a new organization is durability and sustainability. You have to sustain such organizations because they are basically voluntary associations depending on individual leadership and initiative. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll now begin my presentation very quickly. Mega trends in the Indo-Pacific region, the role of big powers, and let me focus on the United States. Yeah, and that also is an area where I work on. And we can move on very quickly. All countries have principles, and they also have the practice of foreign policy. We know in reality that there is always a gap between principles and promise. It's true for all countries. The United States is no exception. So while it has these noble principles, there is the intervention of domestic politics and foreign politics or international politics that changes the picture, and that therefore points out to you also the human weakness when it comes to implementation of noble policies. So I'll go very fast. You see, the policy is always good, but just to put a very quick, in a nutshell, the background of the US involvement in Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific started in the middle of the 19th century with the opening of Japan. As you know, the Tokugawa shogunate began the modernization of Japan, but that is after Commodore Perry made a visit in 1857. And since then, the opening of the West, you can see what has happened to Japan. It has really progressed and modernized. And, but the US also wanted to be more involved in the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific, and they used the term equal commercial opportunity. But this was because there were other imperialist European powers that had already claimed a stake. The slicing of the Chinese melon, as you know, and all the European powers were very interested in taking advantage of power vacuums in Asia. This is something we have to deal with even today. Once we create a power vacuum, others will come in, and when they come in, they are not going to promote our interests, it will be their interests. So there was the open door doctrine to justify the US greater involvement in the Asia Pacific. Next, we go to, so we fast forward to the current era. What are really US objectives in the Indo-Pacific region? And what are some of the mega trends? You see, the mega trends are also linked very much to what the US is doing. This is very, very interesting. So we cannot ignore the United States. Concept of Indo-Pacific, Professor Johan spoke about it. But I think some of the key trends here, strategic competition, managing the strategic US-China relationship. This is going to be a continuing element in the power struggle between two major powers. One is rising, as you know, China. The other is a resident power and perhaps declining. And therefore, you will see that they will be contesting. One is contesting for new space. The other will not give up the old space. And so this competition is going to go on. And ASEAN, of course, is caught in between. And I think my colleagues have also talked about the dilemma of ASEAN, about not taking sides. But for the US, remember, the United States is a very strong military power, even today. So if you take the dimensions of power, only the United States still is supreme. Only the United States has the most number of military alliances in the world. What does that show? You can't say that's pure hegemony. It's also because other states want to have a relationship with the United States for their own security. So there are these dimensions, and in Southeast Asia, that's also true. The United States is still the most important power for many countries, including ASEAN. So when push comes to shove, you ask them to choose. I think it has already been mentioned, very quietly, they may not say anything, but they would still prefer the American deterrent power and the balance of power role that the United States can play in this region. Okay, we move on. I think I've already said about the US-China competition. We will not dwell on that. We'll go to the economic dimension. Also, I think, has been mentioned by Prof. Johan and also others. So some of the points, as you know, overlap because these are the mega trends and they have to be mentioned. The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework is a way of the United States trying to compete with China. But I'll give you the bottom line. At the end of the day, China today is having more cash than the United States. So that is the reality. So the United States will find it a great challenge to compete with China economically. Militarily, it is strong, but economically, I think China is still on the rise. And you know, at the end of the day, people are not really, governments, regimes are not really looking for transparency, accountability, responsibility. They want to deliver goods and services to their people, and they don't want the sponsors to ask too many questions. So between China and the United States, given their systems, the US system will demand more accountability for money that it gives out. This is not very comforting for countries that do not want this kind of transparency. Yeah? So therefore, China has a little bit of an advantage. Of course, the relationship of the United States with Japan and South Korea is very strong. This is another mega trend. The security relationship between the United States and South Korea and the security arrangements it has with other Southeast Asian countries represents a major military trend, and I think this has already been mentioned. There is AUKUS. To me, AUKUS is a major military trend. It's a mega trend, security trend in the region. The United States, Britain, and Australia. Because they couldn't get the Quad Alliance to work together very sort of in a synergistic manner with the United States. So the US preferred to work with allies that they really can rely on. And usually these are the, what you call, they call them the Anglo-Saxon suspects. Australia, Canada, United States, UK, and so on. They are very willing partners because they see the world in the same dimension. They read the world order in the same dimension. And of course, at the end of the day, they want the Western European supremacy to still prevail. So on that, there is convergence. But as you know, there's a challenge. The challenge is coming from India, China, and other countries, and even ASEAN, that and does not want to take sides in this mega trend, which can be very disturbing to us. So I think we'll move on then to the Biden administration. I think we know the Biden administration started with multilateralism, to try to differentiate itself from the Trump administration. But however, at the end of the day, if you look at US, what really works is bilateralism. The multilateralism is a proposal, is a strategy, but the real tactic is bilateralism. Because in bilateralism, you can get very specific agreements. And this is how the US-Korea, US-Japan alliance, US relationship even with India, now becoming more important strategic partner in the competition with China. And the United States also with individual ASEAN countries also has very strong bilateral elements. So now we go on to 5, if you can keep moving it very quickly. Now, if we look at the US role in the Indo-Pacific region, especially in terms of specific issues, I think this was already mentioned, Taiwan. Taiwan is a very important marker, security marker in this region. It can be a very major flashpoint for the future. So that has to be handled very carefully. And I think China is very conscious that at this particular time, it will not have the capability to take on the US. The US is still the most dominant maritime military power. China will be able to challenge it for some time to come. So the Taiwan will still be sort of put in the freezer. There will be occasions when, but I don't think it will lead to a conflict. South China Sea is another flashpoint. Again, I think because of the ASEAN role there, that is going to help to sort of moderate that conflict. And I don't think the United States or China, they are ready to really South China. The situation is, I would say, strategic stability, but with of the as already mentioned, Myanmar is a problem. And I think Professor Ranjit mentioned, and I think we need to also thinking more deeply about this. Malaysia, you see, where I do agree very well, is going to encourage centrifugal tendencies in development. So therefore, the central government's role is extremely crucial. How you keep a diverse society together with so many regions, so much of different political ideologies and so on. So the only way I think Malaysia can survive well, together with Sabah and Sarawak is through inclusivity. And if we show that we can make a success of inclusivity, we will be a very good model for the rest of the ASEAN countries as well. And ASEAN will continue to remain strong and stable, given that individual countries are strong. So we got to hope that Myanmar will also get its act together very soon. So I wouldn't focus too much on 6.1. Can we move on? Who is doing the slides? Yeah, we can keep moving on to the last part of my presentation, and that is the US and Indo-Pacific security, Northeast Asia. Of course, Northeast Asia is a bit of a problem for the United States, given that North Korea is pursuing its campaign to become much more nuclear oriented. So the threat is there. But again, I don't think North Korea will try anything really funny. I do not see that happening. Because North Korea, if it ever makes a mistake, any nuclear confrontation, North Korea will be finished. There won't be enough Korea, but it will be under the South. I think everybody knows what the chips are there. China will not want to disturb that status quo there, nor is the United States prepared to do that. And Russia, of course, has got its own problems there with Ukraine and with Eastern Europe. So basically, you find that the big powers, they are actually in some kind of a stalemate, I would say. Nobody wants to really move too fast or too rashly to upset the apple cart. And so the situation will continue with some conflagrations here and there, like what we are seeing now. Basically, what we are seeing is low-intensity conflicts. These can continue within the broader framework of strategic stability. So if you take the Indo-Pacific region, there is basic strategic stability. So let me move on to the conclusion, Mr. Chairman. So I would say that the United States' role in the Indo-Pacific will remain strong. Of course, there is talk much about the decline of power, but let's not forget the Pax Americana, still use the word, being maintained by the United States anymore. The Pax Americana is a shared concept. The Japanese buy into it. The Australians buy into it. China also buys into it because the US presence, security presence, also provides the opportunity for China to grow economically. India is also quite happy with it. So you still see that there was talk about hegemonic stability and so on. There is a hegemon, yeah, and this hegemon may not be as powerful as before, but still, I think the leadership role of the United States, in my view, is still important to maintain the kind of stability that we are having in the broader area of the Indo-Pacific. So let me conclude, Mr. Chairman, by saying that I think ASEAN, as well as all the other countries, would still look at the US as an indispensable partner in their national interest calculations and also in their foreign policy projections. So in a sense, you see that the United States, you love it or hate it, you want it for your own reasons, to preserve your own national interests and to preserve your regional interests and to pursue a foreign policy that gives you a certain sense of self-confidence. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Prof. Nathan focused on what he thinks will be the situation, strategic situation in the region in the near future or foreseeable future, where the United States and its allies will continue to play a very important, perhaps primacy, primacy in the region. So I think we should move on to the discussion phase. Maybe we have, 15, 20 minutes for discussion. Yeah, and I urge all our participants who are in the hall, in the room, to participate. Please ask your questions or make your comments as succinctly and briefly as possible. And before you do that, if you could identify yourself, tell us who you are, where you come from. Thank you.
Testing.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri. Thank you very much to all the speakers. I have a very short and concise question actually. Maybe any of the speakers can answer. Maybe we can have a discussion. It's actually about India. What is actually the role of India here? Thank you.
Very good question. Because I think, India is going to, by the middle of this century, the projection is that India will be the second biggest economic power in the world. Second only to China. So it's going to play a very significant role. It is already beginning to do so, but may the panel like to comment on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, can I comment? Yeah, that's a good question about India. You see, India is India, and India will never become dependent or become what you call a military ally of any power, including the United States. It is convenient for India to have some closer strategic partnership with the United States because it serves the interests of both parties. Both want to actually contain China. They do not want China to become too strong and overpowering, and therefore they will become very sort of subsidiary in the balance of power calculations. So I would say India, remember, is a democracy. That's the other big difference, yeah? And also they have a lot of internal problems too within India. So a lot of time of management of India will be consumed internally. They do not really have very much time for foreign policy projection. I don't think they are really interested in projecting power as such. They do not want to be seen in the context of the United States projecting power. That is not their goal. But they want to be a strong military power and economic power for their own national interests. They do have a border problem with China, as you know. They need to take care of that. And you see, the BJP did one good thing, I would say, which the Congress failed to do. And that is, Congress could have made India a nuclear power. They lacked the guts. But when the BJP took hold of the central government, they made India a nuclear power in 1997 or 1998. Yeah, and as a result of that, of course, China now will have to be a little more careful in how it moves, militarily and so on against India, because India is a very strong military power. And having nuclear weapons, therefore China cannot use nuclear weapons to threaten India. So I think this basic nuclear balance of terror will continue, and India will be an important component in that.
Thank you very much, Prof. Zarina, for your question. Yes, as Prof. K.S. Nathan said, India is India, and it will remain so. Now, India is a rising power, and there is this perception, the belief that a rising power will want to expand. But in the case of India, I think it wants to be visible, more visible, one. Number two, I think India, with all this, the mega trends or whatever you have in Asia Pacific, I still want to use the word Asia Pacific. After this, I'll use Indo. Now, India, wait, India felt a bit left out. So it wants to join in the show. So that's where the mega trend. So now, with Quad, they have coined this idea of the Indo-Pacific, from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, unless you change the name of that ocean. But so it is Indian Ocean. And I agree that yes, India is the largest democracy, etc. But India internally, I think, has a lot to manage, to do, to improve its performance, to become a real, power for. And Prof. Nathan, I think India has also embraced a bit of Americanism, the United States. It's okay. It has embraced the United States. Quite different from previously when they were very close to the Soviet Union. Okay?
Okay,
Yeah,
everyone
one-
wants
a
to.
little bit.
Oh, yes.
I think two dimensions maybe we have missed out. One is India's look east policy. India has got a look east policy, and they are trying to have closer association with Japan and also with Vietnam. I think we should not forget that. The other one is BRICS. I think the whole forum is very interesting, very good. Nothing to, but as a counterpoise to this contest between, say, two big powers, two superpowers, America and China, we haven't discussed we didn't mention anything about BRICS. Would anybody want to initiate a little bit on that? India is also a member of BRICS, partner of BRICS. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought we were going to dismiss India. Thank you for still giving it some relevance. I think India is a great power. It was a great power. It will remain, well, for a while it went off the radar. Now it's trying to come back. It will have problems, democracy, in the Indian, brand of democracy and this and that. But I think it's coming up, and it will start to be more credible, a more credible and active player. You mentioned look east. Actually, India has progressed from look east to act east. And there is this north-south thing, the global north versus the global south. And power is transiting from the global north to the global south, from the west to the rest. I would say the rest. So it's becoming a more diffuse world. It's mega trends. These are the mega trends. While, of course, as Prof. Nathan and a few others said, in the military sphere, the US and its allies will remain a primary power for the foreseeable future. No challenge. Because unlike China, which acts mostly alone, and the others mostly alone, the United States is always the posse. They have the cowboy posse, they work with allies, and beyond that, strategic partners, including Singapore. We forget Singapore, we are very quiet on Singapore, including Singapore. So, it's a leading edge military power. It's not going to give up that, and there are many other things, but I am the moderator. So, so can we go on? Next question. Next question, comment. Sorry, please. Prof. Zakaria will have so much more to say afterwards.
No, you mentioned India, you mentioned Singapore briefly. What about Indonesia?
Oh, good question. Good question.
Indonesia post Jokowi.
Prof.
Yeah.
Nathan,
Right.
no, you won't dismiss him. No. Please.
Yeah. That's of course, that's a very penetrating question, I would say, about Indonesia. But I take a quite very benign view of Indonesia. You see, Indonesia is potentially the largest and most powerful nation in the ASEAN grouping. and also in Southeast Asia. But what is the greatest strength of Indonesia? The greatest strength is that it leads from behind. It does not lead from front, because that is very confrontational. That's why if you take the Indonesian cultural values, they are important for all of Southeast Asia, and they are also important strategic values. Musyawara and mufakat. You see, first you enter into a discussion. If there is any problem, you don't rush immediately to mobilize your military or threaten your neighbors. But the Indonesian style is very relaxed. So do not interpret that as weakness. I think it's the greatest strength that Indonesia provides for the leadership of ASEAN by leading from behind. And you can ask Dr. Mahathir, he learned a real good lesson from Pak Suharto. He went and announced the EAEC, you remember, much earlier without consulting President Suharto. And when he went and met Suharto, you know what he did? He pulled his pants down. You see? So that is the thing. I mean, we have to defer and give respect to countries that are around us, and those that have certain strengths, we must recognize. And one of the greatest strengths to me of Indonesia is its cultural strength and confidence, borrowing heavily from India and China and from all civilizations. Indonesia's strength is its cultural confidence and strength, not military power.
Well, Indonesia has been considered since a long time as having this sense of entitlement, at least in Southeast Asia or in ASEAN. So it's there, it's already there. There is a certain influence. And secondly, yes, Indonesia will eventually come out. It is already acknowledged as a middle power. And it's the strongest, most influential country in ASEAN. However, I think Indonesia has still to do something in terms of its performance to increase its national power base, etc. So it's on the way to doing that. How long we have to wait, I don't know actually. But the road is more or less easier now and clear for Indonesia. Nobody in ASEAN dares to sort of oppose Indonesia. And I think Indonesia in the past had a lot of influence. It has this certain, what you want to call soft power, just like India. So it's not a problem. Prof. Khadijah, I think Indonesia is an okay power. It has no enemies.
I think Indonesia is coming out of this mold. So I'm having a little bit different view from Prof. Nathan, and Rohanas is almost similar. I think Indonesia is coming out of that mold. And this huge mega trend actually in Borneo. What does that show? It shows that Indonesia wants to be in the hottest area of competition, and it wants to project its power. So to me, and we must also remember one thing, of all the countries in this region, with all the disputes in the South China Sea, who stands up to China? Yes, soft. They are, as Nathan says, they talk for, what do you call it, at the back. But China dare not interfere or infiltrate into their sea waters. They do that into every other country. Philippines having a hell of a lot of problems with China. Vietnam is having a hell of a lot of problems. Malaysia, nothing. Ask the Chinese. Go into Indonesian waters. China, the only country China is afraid, this is my view, I may be wrong. The only country China is afraid in this region is Indonesia. So I think Indonesia, I used the word just now, local hegemon, I'm not sure whether that is Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have, on Indonesia. Indonesia is half of ASEAN, both in terms of territory as well as population. It is the bedrock of ASEAN, and it keeps ASEAN, on the steady and straight. And in the future, I agree with it will play a greater role, and others are engaging. In fact, Indonesia more than ASEAN in many spheres. So, but ASEAN is Indonesia is a constructive player so far at least, and hopefully it will remain so. We have about 3-4 minutes left. One last question. Yes, please. Okay, two together. Short one, quick. Very short.
What can we take and maybe opt out from all these mega trends that are happening? Thank you.
Excellent. Next one, yourself, please.
Prof, I'm sorry if my question this goes beyond slightly beyond. So my question is on, but still in the Indo-Pacific region. My question is on Taiwan. Last 2 or 3 years, Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. So of course, Chinese retaliated. So do you foresee such provocative action will ever happen again? And what would be Chinese action on this action?
Can you repeat your thing? I'm not so clear.
Last 2 or 3 years, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the US, visited
okay.
Taiwan.
Yes,
So of course, Chinese retaliated.
Yes.
So do you foresee such a provocative action will ever happen again?
Yes. Trump. Anyway, no, I'm joking. Please. So we have 2 questions. One, what is Malaysia? How is Malaysia itself going to respond? What will it do? Number 2, Trump. Will there be further, if I may use these words, I worry, provocative acts from the US? Provocative acts will make life more interesting for this region. So these are the 2 questions.
Yeah, my first response is always to look at the Chinese and Indian civilizations being 5,000 years old each. I mean, these are very old civilizations and they take a longer view of time. That is very important. You see, so always if you take Xi Jinping, he sees it in the context of many, many years, not just today and tomorrow or settling some issue after Thanksgiving or before Thanksgiving. The American approach, they want quick results. But I think India and China, this is their greatest strength. They can wait. They can wait. They are very patient. If the problem is not solved today, they can wait for a long time. And ASEAN has actually learned from both China and India how we can see time. And you use time to your advantage by not rushing to a solution. I always have said this in many forums. The ASEAN way of solving problems is if there is really something very contentious, they take the issue and put it in the refrigerator. And that is in the freezing compartment. But they will then communicate and work together on all other functional areas. Then after some time, they open the freezing compartment, it's not there. It's gone. Yeah, because they have placed their priority in the right way. And I think this is also strategic management of regional security. It's just not hard military power. There are many other values that come into the equation.
Very good, thanks. Anyone else? No, we don't have much time. So I think I need to wind up. Thank you very much for this thing. I think just to go back to the title, Mega Trends, Impact on Malaysia and the region, I think things are going to get, this is a very volatile, it can be a volatile, but definitely more dynamic phase of history in this region when we move from unipolar world, to use a much abused word, from a unipolar world to a more multipolar world. the process can be a little bit difficult, and where Malaysia, ASEAN can play a better role is to try to make this transition as smooth as they can, as peaceful as they can, and try to bring together the whatever global order that evolves to be more pacific and harmonious and more beneficial to the interests of Malaysia and Southeast Asia. I'm sticking to the topic. Thank you all very much. Now, the Prof. Zakaria.
Thank you to our honorable speakers. Yang berbahagia Profesor the first discussant Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Muhammad Jawahar Hassan. Our first panelist Yang berbahagia Emeritus Professor Dr. Ranjit Singh. Our second panelist Yang berbahagia Professor Rohanas Harun. And the third one Yang berbahagia Professor Dr. K.S. Nathan. Now I would like to call upon Yang berbahagia Professor Dr. Zarina Osman to give a token of appreciation to our panelists. I'd like to invite Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Muhammad Jawahar Hassan to receive the token of appreciation. Now I'd like to call upon Yang berbahagia Emeritus Professor Dr. Ranjit Singh. Next, Yang berbahagia Professor Rohanas Harun. And last but not least, Yang berbahagia Professor Dr. K.S. Nathan. Once again, I would like to thank to all our panelists for today's plenary session. But we are not done yet. Please bear with me. We have another session after this. Ladies and gentlemen, the end of the plenary session just now marks the end of our conference today. We are grateful to have the esteemed speakers for invaluable contributions and to all delegates for their active participation. Your presence and engagement have made this conference a success. Ladies and gentlemen, as we close this conference, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to everyone who has contributed to its success. We thank our sponsors, the organizing committee, and all the volunteers for their hard work and dedication. And now we proceed for the launching of the Malaysian International Studies Association, MyISA. I would like to invite Yang berbahagia Professor Datuk Dr. Zakaria Haji Ahmad to deliver his keynote speech and proceed with the launching of MyISA. Please welcome Datuk.
I just want to say this has been a wonderful day for all of you. I wasn't here in the morning, but I came in the afternoon. I know that many of you presented papers, and then we had some very scintillating, I would say, discussion about the Indo-Pacific. I'm very pleased with this MyISA. I'm so pleased to meet some of my old colleagues. I wouldn't say old colleagues. I would say the gathering of eagles, because these are the people who have been the pioneers of international relations studies in the universities. So we are going to be a passing generation, these eagles. Well, I'm glad to see that there are new eaglets coming up to the fore. All you people that are now working as lecturers in the universities, I congratulate you. I wish you all the best, and I hope that you will continue to sustain the study of international relations as a discipline. So, dear friends and esteemed colleagues, to the distinguished guests and also students, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to be here. I don't know why I was asked to be here, actually. but that means maybe I'm very old. uh, and very old means that I had a long experience in academia. I still am an academic, and I've been at the forefront when the universities were coming up. Most people forget that before 1970, we had only one university. Now, post 1970, into this present era, we have a lot of universities. We have public and private universities. Some people may say that we have too many universities, actually. That's an issue that we might want to look at, because it's not very clear what the direction of the government is in terms of the role of higher education in Malaysia. And we should look at it. When we go to Germany, we find that Germany places a lot of emphasis on technical education, and that helps the development of Germany. In Malaysia, I don't think we should have too many universities, but that's another topic that we can think about. Now, so I congratulate this Professor Zarina. I have to say, it was a right decision to appoint her as a lecturer in my department of strategic studies a long time ago. You know, I've seen her rise and blossom as a scholar. And actually, I have to tell you, I selected her because I found that when she was an undergraduate in the United States, she had done a lot of welfare work with the Hmong community of Laos, who had been displaced in Laos, and of course, the Americans had brought them to United States. In fact, one of the Hmong became a champion gymnast at the Olympics, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, very pretty girl, right? If you remember. So, but anyway, the point is that when I saw her resume and application, I said, this is the person I want in the department, because she has got a good heart. She thinks not about international relations, she thinks of the international welfare as well. I think this is something that we ought to think about. We ought to think about when we are scholars, We can talk about all this big power, hegemonic stability and all that, but we got to remember at the heart of it is the fortunes and the rise and fall of countries. And so that's something that we must pay attention to. I'm not sad to say. I just want to say that I want to point out in the discussion just now, we didn't discuss enough about Malaysia. What is Malaysia's political direction? Where are we headed? I'm distressed. I share with the concerns of Professor Ranjit when he says rising state nationalism in Sabah and Sarawak. I can see it too. I felt it over the last 20 years, whenever I go to those two states, because the people of Sabah and Sarawak are very upset that they've been denied what they wanted in the Malaysia agreement. And something we ought to think about, and that brings about the whole issue of international relations. Now, this conference is interesting because it brought about colleagues from all over the country and also from a few from abroad. I'm also glad, I want to thank Politicus. There's a representative here? But Politicus is an organization based in Netherlands. They provided the funding for this conference. Otherwise, we won't be here. So there's a very good thing that, again, thanks to the initiative of Professor Zarina. So now what we have is, what are we doing here and what we should be doing for the International Studies Association. Now, Professor Zarina gave me some notes, and in the notes she talked about the fact that how the disciplines have been developed in Malaysia. It's very interesting to look at it, because I don't think the government had a master plan that they should have international relations or social sciences in the manner that we as scholars think about, But it so happens that we have, because they wanted to develop public universities as tertiary institutions which can deliver education and training to people, to young people especially. And so they saw it from that light. But they did not focus on the development of the various academic departments in the universities. This is mostly left to the academic leaders in the universities. And I have to say that to some extent we have succeeded, to some extent we did not succeed. We did not succeed because I think many disciplines are still underdeveloped. MyISA, in your future conference, you got to have themes which deal with the theoretical postulates of the things that we study and what the assumptions we hold. You know, whether or not these are Western concepts or these concepts that are of universal quality that can assist us in our understanding of our varied societies. So this is a big challenge. And I think that's why I think the universities actually have failed, because we have advanced in building universities, but we did not advance in building enough knowledge. So this is something that's a challenge for MyISA, and then we should think about that. Now, I was informed, or I'm informed rather, by Dr. Zarina that the mission of MyISA is to advocate the study of international relations in Malaysia, to foster research that broaden our understanding and facilitate informed discussion on political global matters. That's very noble. Now, you have to be very careful, because you are not an organization of advocacy. And you have to be very careful, because now your leadership is okay. But later you might find the leadership think differently, and they might use this even as a political instrument to further their goals. And we can see that develop in Malaysia, right? I have to say that the Association of Professors, for example, they're a bit doubtful in some ways, because they took on a stand that supported the regime. So, and I think that's not what scholars should do. Scholars can have their opinions, but they shouldn't intrude into the political process, nor should the political process intrude into academia. I think that's very key for us to remember that. But MyISA cannot be a platform where you want to discuss many issues of current concern. I think this is not what this association should do. This association, we should generate scholarship, build up expertise, develop the kind of thinking that we need in terms of the direction of everyday events. That's what you should do. Dr. Nathan mentioned just now about the Malaysian International Affairs Forum. That's exactly what the MIF can do, because they were not a bunch of scholars. They were people interested in international affairs, and therefore they could organize forums which we can discuss issues of concern, shall we say, of interest. So, for example, what's happening in Gaza, that's the kind of conference we should do. But when a scholarly association does that kind of work, we have to be very careful, because you might lose the sense of independence as you organize these kind of meetings. So this is, and therefore I would caution against MyISA. I was going to say I can say ISA actually, I don't know. MyISA, why? How can you choose this acronym? Anyway, so you have to be careful about hyperbole, okay, and the fact that you self-aggrandize and you think that scholars have a lot to contribute to study of international relations. A long time ago, there was a man called Tan Sri Ghazali Shafi'i, you know what I mean? And when I met him, actually I was working in Wisma Putra, and then I left Wisma Putra to become an academician at UKM. And he told me, you know, Zach, when you can do, when you cannot teach, you know what I mean? So it was criticism of me, of course, because I left Wisma Putra. But I didn't at that time answer him. You know? I wanted to tell him, sir, it's important to do, but it's also important to teach. Because if you don't teach the correct things, we cannot do. You know what I mean? But I didn't have the time because he passed away. So that was it. I just wanted to show you that story, small anecdote about the fact that we do the internet and what we should be doing. Now, I look at the program that you have for today. I was very intrigued. Because I began to surmise that actually this is not an international relations association. This is really International Studies Association, because you've got a lot of topics there which actually don't have nothing to do with foreign policy. You know, you're looking at migrants, you're looking at refugees. These are I won't say esoteric topics, but these are the topics that are more left to cognate disciplines of political science, not so much in terms of international relations. So I think you have to decide what you want to be. So I know what you want to be, because you're trained in the United States. You're thinking of U.S. International Studies Association. Okay, so that's what the model you're looking at. Actually, you should look at the model. If you're talking about international relations, you should look at the model of the Japan Association of International Relations, for example, JAIR. You know, they're closer to studying international relations issues, not talking about all the other kinds of issues you want to do it. But if you're looking at the US model, the ISA, even the ISA, right, they don't go into the kind of topic that you have decided for today. But this is just a comment only. It's something that you can build on later. So we cannot bring all and sundry into the association. You got to have people who actually are really people doing international relations. And then we can discuss, of course, you know, whether or not feminism theory is the one that's appropriate to study instead of mainstream realism in international relations. I think this is the key element that we need to consider. So I mentioned just now about the fact that we have overproduced graduates. I believe the number is quite big. The big problem is, yeah, we produce them, but they've become useless in our economy. You know, they train, but they're not trained well enough so that they can go into the economy. So this is something that we have to think about, because international relations is not an esoteric discipline, but it's not a discipline that everybody wants to take part of. So we cannot produce too many IR graduates, in other words. We need to have a good supply so that we can staff them, you know, with Wisma Putra, Ministry of Defense, maybe Ministry of Trade. But that's it. So there's not enough, okay? But so we have to think about it. It's a supply and demand issue. And I think that the leadership of MyISA, right, should think about that a bit more. What do you do after this? First conference, then we need to have a second conference. When you're going to have the second conference, because politicals won't be around all the time to give you the money. The government nowadays, they're a bit stingy on the money. So we got to think about that. But I think we should continue with the conference, maybe not next year, but maybe 2 years after now, right? And then have it done and do it more properly in terms of the kind of program that I was talking about. But I have to congratulate you. This program was great. It's very good, right? And I look at it and I say, wow, did a lot of work, this committee, yeah? Hardworking guys. Okay, so I salute you. I congratulate you for doing what you've done in the thing. I won't talk much more about the development discipline. I think we do have a serious problem. There's not enough scholarship. There's not enough scholarship. Not enough work produced in the journals so that we know that our scholars are producing. Now, there's one scholar that I know that does a lot of work, and I think he's making a mark. Because he's making a mark where he's putting theoretical concept and he's trying to promote it. This is the concept of hedging, right? I disagree with it, but I think that at least now he's getting the recognition. But that's a theoretical input into the study of international relations. So that's the kind of work I think we ought to do. In Malaysia, it's very interesting, you know. We have been fantastic in terms of not only concepts like Zopfan, but in the military, in the defense field, we have been fantastic in producing a concept called Kesban. Everybody's forgotten about this concept. But this is a concept which is about security and development, right? Which we did during the first communist insurgency, and which we did very successfully. So, but theoretically, it's not been well explored, you know what I mean? It's not been well, shall we say, propagated in our understanding. And yet, if you look at it, a lot of problems now in the world, a lot have to do with insurgency. You know, I mean, you look at what happened in Iraq, what happened in Afghanistan, right? And yet, nobody ever put a proposal to the Americans to say, why not you look at Kesban as a strategy that you could have used? Americans spent 20 years in Afghanistan, you know, with zero results at the end of it, and so many billions of dollars. And yet, right, this was not enough propagated. So it's something that we ought to think about. So we need to cultivate, I would say, or maybe innovate, so that the study of IR can become much more useful in terms of providing the. That's the kind of thing, the support I think that you can give to the government in terms of the scholarly output. So that's an area that I think one should consider that. Okay, I won't spend any more time. I had a speech written out, but given the circumstances, being late in the evening, and you don't want to listen to an old man, right? I just wanted to say those few words that I have. Again, I want to congratulate Professor Zarina and the committee, very hardworking, and looks very, very promising. So we'll look forward to more of your activities, and God willing, because I'm getting on, God willing, I can come and participate in the kind of meetings that you have. So on that note, let me launch the MyISA. MyISA, right? Your committee was formed last year, but now we're launching the association using this opportunity today so that we can launch it. So this is very good. You must remember, don't suffer the fate of what Professor Nathan said, the MIAF, okay? And a few other associations, actually. They've been formed, but they become, over the years, very stagnant. So because you are young, right? So enough energy, keep the thing going, keep it pulsating, right? So we can look forward to more sessions like this. So congratulations. So I launch it. That's all, right? I need to launch it, right? Just say I launch it. I launch it. Okay. Okay. Apa lagi?
Prof. Datuk, we invite you to, for a gimmick. Thank you, Prof. Dato. And I would like to invite Professor Zarina to give a token of appreciation to Yang Berbahagia Prof. Dato. Please welcome. With that, thank you to Yang Berbahagia Professor Datuk Dr. Zakaria for officiating the establishment of the Malaysian International Studies Association, MyISA. We hope that the knowledge and insight gained from this conference will contribute to more formulation of effective strategies and policies in the near future. We look forward to seeing you again in the next Malaysian MyISA conference in the future. Until then, we wish you all the best in your future endeavors. With that, thank you and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And we invite everybody for a photography session in the front.